are you? Oh, in a second.
Sneak peek, I'm very good. Got a lot more to say. I'm not sure if I have an answer to what did I wish I knew before I started my
Yeah, that's what I'm
PhD.
trying to think next.
Um, I feel like a lot of the stuff I worked out during my PhD.
Surviving your PhD, an interview to learn tricks and tips about what to do and how to survive a PhD. Coming up, coming up in 2 minutes.
I
It's a
thought
good
you'd
introduction.
started. I was like, okay.
Coming up and coming up.
Are you planning on sitting around after?
Depending on my PhD is going, I see what other commitments I could take.
I feel like this chair
Yeah,
is
Yeah, I
just
was
go
set 2 minutes a minute ago, so still 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay.
I don't think anyone.
Maybe 1 minute. What is she doing?
I think she's going to walk around with
She's
the
gonna go.
microphone.
Where are you?
At the presentation table.
Oh, okay. So you're overseeing.
I haven't danced. That I am currently kind of colonizing like the corner around my desk.
Just moving mugs in like every direction.
Because Errol's desk is next to me, and the next desk next to between mine and Errol belongs to a postdoc on our lab who doesn't like some of the numbers. So as we're walking, so I'm just like, this
Yeah,
whole
isn't it?
corner's mine.
Yep.
And just like removing the barriers between them. Slowly emptying my stuff out. It's my alternative, like if I don't get an office, this is what I'm doing.
If you want to survive, come upstairs.
Okay, so I think we should get started.
Yeah, okay.
Cool.
Let's go then.
Okay. Okay, so I think we'll just get started. We'll keep this quite informal. We have these two amazing people here with us, Dr. Tyndale and Dr. Jamni Mohan. So they, full disclosure, they worked as research coordinators with the community with us for a while as well. Ty's still working with us, and they have in common that they both finished their PhD quite recently. And as a PhD student myself, I have a lot of questions to ask. So I'm just gonna stick to a couple of questions that I wrote down. But first of all, Jamni, Tyne, could you just give us a brief introduction of what was your research topic? What's the field that we're working on during your PhD?
Um, Hi guys, I'm Yamni. My field of research was visual neuroscience, and I looked at how the brain does computation so that we can see lines.
Hi, everyone. So I am in the School of Culture and Communication, so I'm in the humanities, and my PhD looked at the relationship between American literature in the 20th century and surveillance structures, particularly those organized by the CIA and the FBI. And I looked at the way that we can use writing during that period to re-theorize surveillance. And now I'm moving on to research that looks at ways of rethinking concepts of big data surveillance through the internet using different kinds of literary texts.
Okay, so I could talk about those things forever, I think. Those really interesting topics. But I want to focus today on how did you survive your PhD? So I want to know, like, do you have any tips or tricks that you think you could actually convey to us? Stuff that you would actually think that if you had known when you started your PhD would have made your life easier, and not only in your PhD but in general in your life going through the PhD.
I'm not sure about stuff I would have liked to know before I started my PhD, but one thing I found really useful was building really good support networks and building very diverse support networks. A lot of things, like when you think about a PhD, a lot of the times you're by yourself, and I am terrible at being by myself, so I found that making friends with different groups of people or just being part of different activities and communities really helped me get through my PhD, because otherwise it would have just been me thinking about the same thing over and over again, and that would be bad.
I found a really useful thing that I tried to do from the beginning was to force myself to do other stuff. And to encapsulate that, I'm going to read you a song lyric. Don't worry, it's pretty cheesy, but so there's a New Zealand band called OMC. Does anyone know who they are? Anyway, they had sort of one-hit wonder in 1995 called How Bazaar, and this song is ridiculous. It's mostly about driving around in cars, but the chorus goes, "Ooh baby, ooh baby." I'm not going to sing it. It's making me crazy, it's making me crazy. Every time I look around, look around. Every time I look around, every time I look around. Every time I look around, it's in my face. And that chorus is literally how I felt through the whole first 2 years of my PhD. I'd be having a conversation with someone at a party or at a cafe, and I just did not feel like I was present at all. I felt like I was just constantly doing my PhD, even when I wasn't doing it. And so what I found by the third year was useful for coping and actually productive for research was to force myself to do activities where I simply couldn't engage with the thesis at all. So one of those, which I think I mentioned yesterday, was I started umpiring netball, and you couldn't have your laptop out on the court, you couldn't have your phone. I was engaged in an activity that was using a completely different part of my brain, and I found that after 2 hours of doing that, I would actually come up with new ideas rather than feel completely stifled by them. So although a lot of people say, you know, you need to network, you need to do all these social activities, one key tip I think I would give is that find yourself a fun activity that uses a completely different track of thinking to that which you engage when you're doing the research, and it's really productive.
Can I just add to that?
Yes, please.
That I believe is also a really important point. Just to add on to that, I just also want to say that, like, you can't always think about your thesis, right? And even when you're working, you find that you don't spend all your time working on your thesis. There will be lulls where you won't be working on your thesis, but then if you, as Tyne said, don't do other productive things, you will probably end up feeling really bad about yourself, as I did at some stages, about not being productive. Doing other things that don't involve your PhD also helps with that, I think, yeah.
Just on the question of what did I wish I'd known, Paul Gruber touched on this yesterday. I think it was super important that he mentioned the idea of the argument, and that is when you start the PhD, there are 50 plus directions that it could head in, and there's a seemingly never-ending amount of material that could go into the document. And what I discovered probably too late was you just have to pick some kind of argument and stick to it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a Nobel Prize winning argument, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an argument that is of a kind of success angle. It could be that your argument ends up being that there was some kind of failure in a particular mode of thinking. But as long as you can pick one and stick to it and convince some examiners that it makes sense, it's an examinable thesis. And that's not to undersell the research itself. It simply means that for 3 years you have to conduct rigorous thinking and writing and methodology, but what gets you over the line is the ability to just take your hands off that and say, okay, I'm going to go down this one train of thought and make that the key thing. So it sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but I think picking an argument sooner rather than later and trying to support it as best you can, rather than collecting never-ending amounts of material, is a good way to keep yourself sane, particularly in year 3.
Yeah, that's amazing, teams. I think the I'll get back to you. So I think the main 2 topics that you were actually mentioning is like basically, well, 3: being part of a community, engaging with other people. Secondly, time management. You need to think about not having time for your own, not only your PhD. And thirdly, you got to focus on your PhD, not do everything. Right? Am I right? Okay, cool. Nice 3 tips. You're quite engaged, both of you, on the community of Restblad. I would just want to have a quick run through of what do you think the benefits were of joining a community that's a community that actually lets you do other stuff, but it's also related to your PhD. So do you think it was beneficial? Would you recommend it to other people?
So when I first started with ResBaz, I think being a part of the research platform, the ResBaz community, and teaching MATLAB, I used to be a MATLAB research community coordinator here, and my journey for ResBaz was very haphazard. And did I say my journey of ResBaz or MATLAB? My journey of learning MATLAB was very haphazard. I had to learn it like by watching YouTube videos and kind of figuring out what to do in a very short period of time. So first of all, I think joining ResBaz really allowed me to consolidate my MATLAB skills, and teaching other people was also very beneficial for consolidating my skills. One of the reasons I actually joined ResBaz was because I used to be terrified of, I'm still terrified of talking in front of people. And one of the goals I'd set out for the year I joined ResBaz was to get myself up on and in front of people more often so that I can overcome that fear. And I think personally that was very useful for me. I really lost my train of thought, so I'm going to let Tyne talk for a bit.
You're a great public speaker.
Absolutely.
This is going to sound a bit grim, but on the topic of community, and particularly the interdisciplinary community of researchers that I've got to meet through this job, I think the main thing for me that was beneficial, or has been beneficial and continues to be, is it's a way to escape bitchy interdepartmental gossip, or departmental gossip, and that kind of vacuum culture you end up in your own department or your own school, where everyone's just kind of on edge and competing with each other and constantly going on and on and on about the same issues. Just running my department into the ground. To be able to meet other researchers who are also having those issues, but in a different faculty and realize that it's not just your own that is in a sort of state of crisis potentially, and also that the sort of job market issues are similar. So to be able to talk to people outside your own discipline about general things is really, really helpful and gives you that sense that there is a network of people beyond your immediate school and your immediate supervisor and whoever.
So we're almost running out of time, but I don't want to go without asking you one last question, which is, you finished your PhD now. Now what? What comes next? What are your dreams? Where are you heading to? What are you doing to get there? Just very brief. Just point us to the right direction, if that's possible.
So I've been recently thinking a lot about this because I have handed in my thesis and I don't know what to do. So my strategy for the moment is to try to do everything, which is probably not the best strategy.
I've heard that before.
So I'm kind of trying to do this by applying for as diverse, like I made a list of all my skills and I've tailored many resumes accordingly, and I'm just applying for any job according to the skills, and I'm going to pick the first one I get. It's probably not the best strategy, but I feel like, you know how I don't know if you guys know, but they say if you want to make a choice between two things, flip a coin, and then when you find that like it's one or the other, you'll really know what you want to do. That's kind of what I'm aiming for. I'm gonna try as many things as possible, and hopefully what I really want to do will really reveal itself. But I wouldn't, like, unless that's also something you want to do, I wouldn't recommend it. It leads to a lot of cognitive dissonance inside, because you're kind of convinced that you are made to do, your skills are suited for one job, and then trying to make yourself suited for other jobs, and then you're convinced that you can do all of these things. But then in the end, you just end up it really comes down to what you want to do, and when you don't know what you want to do, it's very difficult.
Awesome. Tyne, in a few words, what do you think?
I'm exactly the same. I'm currently working 5 jobs, 2 consulting jobs and a range of other things, and sort of sessional lecturing and teaching, and just so many jobs. But the main thing I would add to what Yami just said is try and step away from academia or this place a little bit so that you can get some experience in learning how other organisations structure themselves, because I think there's a bit of an illusion when you're around universities too much to assume that that's how the world operates in other spheres. So it's absolutely invaluable for your own career, even if you end up in universities, to have a sense of how different kinds of businesses operate, how their processes work, and that you're on top of those things as well. And that's, for this year at least, what I'm doing across all these different jobs is just trying to get experience and knowledge and all of those things before I potentially return.
Well, Jamni, Tyne, thank you very much. So please join me in thanking them for their time.
Hey guys, just want to let you know next sessions are now starting downstairs in the tents. If you want to win an Amazon Echo, head down and play some VR, grab a raffle ticket, and win an Amazon Echo, potentially. No promises. You may potentially win one.